Ready?
Yes.
Good evening. It is Tuesday, October 10th at 6 p.m., and I will call to order the regular meeting of the Millwood City Council for October 2023. At this time, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Stravens, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, Lisa, do you mind taking a roll call for establishing quorums this evening?
Staff and quorum?
Just
I'm
council.
sorry, go ahead, yes. Councilmember Stravens,
Present.
Councilmember Sanders,
Present.
Councilmember Van Hees,
Here.
Councilmember Kohler,
Here.
Councilmember BC.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Freeman.
Present. So please let the record show that all council members are present this evening. Ms. BC is present telephonically. So we do have a quorum established for tonight's meeting. Thank you all very much. And at this time, I would ask for approval of tonight's meeting agenda. First, is there anybody who would like to take, any member of the council that would like to take any of tonight's, make any changes to tonight's agenda as it is presented? Not seeing or hearing any, is there a motion on approving tonight's agenda as presented?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, tonight's meeting agenda is approved as presented. Thank you. And that brings us to our agency reports and presentations for this evening. First up is Chief Frank Soto with Spokane Valley Fire District 1 for the quarterly report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, citizens. Happy to be here this evening to do our quarterly report. This is our second quarter. I will wait till we have it up on the screen.
Here it comes. I practiced this earlier and it worked perfectly. And now it's not. Let me move it here. Nope, not that. There we go. And there and.
Excellent. Okay, for the month of September, we had 1,923 911 calls, and year-to-date, we're at just over 17,000 calls, of which 83% are emergency medical services. Of those calls, they required 2,407 responses for September. Year-to-date, we're just over 22,600 responses for this past month. We had 5 units over 200 calls, with Engine 2, which is directly across from us, that came in at number 6, just under 200 calls. Our busiest unit was Engine 1 with just under 300 calls. Next slide, please. So this is our responses by aid. I think I've told you before about auto aid, mutual aid, things of that nature. So this is specific to auto aid. Generally, we provide aid to Fire Districts 8, Fire District 9, and the City of Spokane, and then they also provide that to us. So again, this is based on the closest unit, regardless of whose area it is. However, we do track which area and whose calls we're going to. Overall, we've responded to roughly 93% of our own calls within our area. Next slide, please. So this is by station area, and we're showing you based on this. Station 8 is our busiest area, followed by Station 7, Station 1, Station 6, Station 10, and Station 2. So nothing's really changed. We're just, the same areas are generally busy, and it is what it is. Next slide, please. So this is overall by call category. Those things, the red bars are 2022, the blue bars are in 2023. Some of them are higher this year than last year. Overall, it's pretty similar. And you'll see the highest sets are emergency medical services, with the largest set is advanced life support calls. So again, our ALS calls that require paramedics is still outpacing our basic life support calls by quite a bit still. So Next slide, please. This is year over year. I thought we were kind of slowing down some. In fact, I was hoping so, but September happened to be our second busiest September in history. So we went from about a 2% gap from last year's calls to just 0.74%. So we're about 128 calls, I believe. Yep, 128 calls less than last year at the same time. Next slide, please. These next two slides are specific just to Millwood. So for the last 3 months, from the last quarterly report, we've had 83 calls. You'll see the blue bubbles indicate where the most amount of calls that we had, and the blue bubbles do indicate EMS calls. Of the 83 calls, 83% were for emergency medical services, and it had almost an even split between ALS and BLS calls. So that was pretty good. Next slide, please. Year to date, we've had 231 calls here in Millwood. Again, the yellow bubbles are for EMS calls, and then the red ones are for fire calls, and then the lightish color are for hazmat and tech rescue calls. 81% of our calls year to date here have been for emergency medical services, so that's still our obviously our number one call everywhere we go. That is my report. Do you have any questions?
Questions for the chief?
You've been busy.
Yes, sir. We haven't slowed down much.
Thank you very much,
Okay,
Chief.
thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Guys, have a great evening.
So our next report was going to be a presentation from the Spokane Regional Homelessness Collaborative. I reached out to Rick Romero there to ask him or one of the group there, Teresa Sanders or Scott, come over and give a presentation. Obviously, I do not see them here. And so without them to present what they are doing, I think at this time we'll just move on from there. And that will also mean that because they have not been able to present to you the item number 7C on tonight's agenda, which was there as a potential action item, which is Spokane Regional Homelessness Collaborative. There won't be anything during that action item. I will reach out to them again and see if they can present themselves at our next meeting. So, but there will be no action then tonight on anything doing with Millwood and the Regional Homelessness Collaborative. So let us just skip over those pages, which is, oh, Dan, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I have some comments to make, but should that be under council comments?
Why don't you just make those in the council comments, because we don't really have anything in the record. But that would be moving then to page 47 of our agenda tonight, which is the, right now, this would be public comments concerning action items. Have we received any comments in person, by email, or by written for any of tonight's action items? We have not, okay. So we have no public comments concerning tonight's action items. Do we need an executive session tonight, Counselor? We do not. So now we're at section 7, action items. First action item is our consent agenda tonight, consisting of the meeting minutes from the September 2023 regular meeting, the September 2023 payroll vouchers and claims, and the September 2023 treasurer's report. Any statements on payroll vouchers and claims or the treasurer's report?
No.
So would any member of the council like to take any of those items in the consent agenda separately? Not seeing or hearing any, do I have a motion on tonight's consent agenda as presented?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, the consent agenda is approved unanimously tonight. Thank you. And so that brings us to our public hearings for tonight. We have a public hearing on our revenue sources for the 2024 budget and a public hearing on the 2024 preliminary budget. Members of the public wishing to provide testimony at the public hearing may do so in person by providing written testimony, or by submitting, or by written testimony, sorry, or by city mail, electronic mail, or directly to the city hall staff. Have we received any written testimony tonight? Do we have anybody signed in on the sign-in sheet for public testimony?
Did not put a separate sheet up for public hearing. So whoever's asking.
So we'll do that in person.
Sorry.
That's it.
about that. Agenda item 11. Yeah.
Okay, no, this would have been 7B. So we will just make the oral call for public testimony. So the first item tonight is our revenue sources for the 2024 budget. Ms. Mackin,
Yes,
are you ready to begin the presentation for the revenue sources?
pull up public hearing one.
I have not yet.
Okay, go to slide 2. This is obviously the revenues. So here's the general fund, how it's funded. What's the matter?
Oh, the lights.
Oh, lights. Oh, sorry. As you can see, as always, taxes make up 89% of the general fund. And calculate them about 1.6 million this year. Licenses and permits are at 37,500. Intergovernmental revenues, or in other words, revenues that are shared with the city at the state level. So that's money from the state. 154,527. And then our charges for goods and services not in the utility fund, 2,000. Fines and penalties around 1,500. That's mainly code enforcement issues. And then miscellaneous at 7,650, and that's mainly investment income or interest held on other accounts for us, in other words, the county, something like that. Next slide, please. And the taxes are distributed like this. The main tax income for the city is retail sales tax. The rest is kind of self-explanatory there. Then we have REIT on the next slide. This is, obviously you guys know what it is, but for the audience, every property that is sold, 0.25% of the sale goes to the city for real estate excise tax. And the city receives approximately $50,000 annually. We were receiving quite a lot more than that when the housing market was really good and houses were selling, but as it slows down, it's greatly slowing down. I do not have a slide prepared for water, but I can tell you there is going to have to be a rate increase. Our fixed costs are over our base rate received. So we're going to have to raise the rate, and also if we don't, we're in danger of not following the drinking water state revolving fund contractual obligations for the loan that we took. So that's all I have on the revenues at this time.
Are there questions from the council on our revenue sources? This is the first presentation of the revenue sources, so.
No, the only presentation, but as we move into the final budget, I will have the water numbers for you. I'm just trying to eke out the least increase that we can take, so.
So, because there's no action on this, should we open the public hearing at the end of the other presentation, or do we do these individually?
Do them
doing individually. So in the interest of clarity, we will now open the public hearing for our revenue sources for the 2024 budget. So anybody who wishes to make comments on the revenue sources for the 2024 budget, please raise your hand and we'll call you up. First call for public comments. Public hearing, any comments? Second call? Any comments on the revenue sources? Third and final call? Seeing none, we will now move on to the 2024 preliminary budget.
This one?
Just take me to slide 2.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So. I've prepared this year the same as last year with the beginning balances, the revenues and costs, and then your bottom line. I'm a little concerned seeing the fund balances go down. But, you know, we've had a lot of capital projects, so that's okay to see the fund balance go down when you have that. You just wanna make sure that your operating revenues and operating expenditures are balancing. So go to, that's the revenues, now we'll show the expenditures. If there's any questions in here, I'm not gonna read the whole thing to you, obviously, everybody can read. But I'll take questions at any time from anyone. Anyone can get a hold of me at City Hall and ask budget questions, I'm happy to answer them. The next slide is the most interesting one because everybody likes to know what the capital projects are gonna be for the following year. Greatly scaled back, actually, from prior years. So, that's how it pans out. The water line, of course. We're still gonna try to do the drinking fountains, painting the inside of City Hall, which hasn't been done in 15 years. The dirt screen, the guys can answer questions about it, I don't know what that is. The water line replacement that Welsh came and talked about last month. When the trail went in, the guys lost their material containment bins. So they're looking to replace those up at Butler, and a lean-to. You'd think that we'd have enough space, but we just don't have enough space. And there's some equipment that doesn't need to be inside, but it should be undercover. The pull-behind compressor, those are getting a little hard to find to rent, and to do crack sealing, we need one. And then the control panel, that Matt is gonna have to answer, I don't know what that does. And the sprinkler system at Sargent, the trail signs, and the street tree replacements, we did put money in to start trying to implement the plan. And that's all I have so far.
Debbie, can we use a REIT for any of those expenditures?
We can for infrastructure expenditures, and, you know, Brian and I haven't looked at what the REIT rules are. There's different ones for 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I think that 2 is a little more stringent about what you can use it for. 1, yeah, absolutely, we could.
So if any member of the council has any suggestions for alternate funds for capital expenditures, like as Debbie said, we have built a pretty decent war chest in the REIT over the last few years, so we could entertain that. It doesn't really seem that anything is particularly out of line for expenditures this year.
Kevin and I actually, let me interject,
Sure.
had a discussion about where we wanted to go this year. And it was pretty important to the mayor and myself that we tried to pull it in and be conservative this year because of sales tax being iffy with the interest rates being so high. So it's pretty conservative compared to prior years.
Well, we know that material costs are gonna be high just because of inflation, and there will be demand as Build Back Better also kicks off, and so there's gonna be competition for supplies and materials until the inflation rate starts to come down. It does make some of the larger capital improvement projects more costly. And so, it's just better to hold that off at this time. So that leads to,
I actually
oh,
have
go
a
ahead,
question.
go ahead.
So Kyle, what is the dirt screen?
So basically, you know how wonderful our valley soil is with all the rocks. Basically, we have, seems like every little job we do, whether it's replacing a side service water line or a fire hydrant, we always have overburden that comes out of those projects. And we usually have a stockpile of it up at Butler. And if we had a screen, we could actually use the backhoe and kind of like a big sifter basically, and sprinkle it over the screen, take a lot of the rocks and stuff out of it, and repurpose it essentially for any kind of topsoiling we'd have to do, like in the park, or anything that we have to touch up, instead of buying it out. We have been buying it through, I think it's called Site One or something now, it used to be Witkoff. And they call it some special garden mix, but it's basically 99.9% sand with a sprinkle of manure in it. And it's not really great. So I mean, a lot of the material we have here is pretty decent if you can get the rocks out of it.
So what does it get it down to? 6-inch minus, 3-inch?
Yeah. Oh, actually even less. I mean, there's a couple different ways you could do it. You could do like a set of grizzly bars, which are just vertical bars that go on it that get the boulders and the big stuff out of it. And then I was actually thinking about having a smaller screen that you would flop over on top of that to actually get down to like 3/4 minus or something, you know, if you want to.
No, I can show it. This one.
Thank you.
This one. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I have one more
Go.
slide to show. Yeah, you did it there.
Go up to do the lights.
Okay. I can sort of get up and do it. This is the property tax levy calculation. Or what I like to call the Price is Right. Because as you know, each way you figure this, the city will only get the lowest number without going over. So there's several different ways to calculate. Obviously, the one on the top is with the highest lawful levy. The next one, the 700,000, never gonna happen, but I have to include it. The controlled by resolution, this is the levy ad valorem that we have you sign off on every year that makes it look like we're taking a 2% increase in property tax, but we're not. We're just trying to catch the changes that came in from the time that we certify ours and have it in by the November 30th. And when the county certifies theirs in January, anything that happened in the middle, if we don't try to bump that up to catch that, it just goes to the county. So we'd rather have it here in Millwood. The same with the 1% increase, which is the highest lawful levy. You folks would pay it in your taxes, but Millwood wouldn't get it. It's gonna happen no matter what, so we wanna make sure it comes here. And I'll be bringing those resolutions to you next month, so.
So if you have questions on and we can just leave that up there then, because we're gonna open the public hearing on the preliminary budget. If you have questions on the levy calculation for this year, it looks like we're gonna certify somewhere around 466, which would be a net increase of, I doubt we would get to, which is $9,150.39. So that is the amount over the entire city that we are looking to take. So at this time, I will open the public hearing for the 2024 preliminary budget. It is 6:26. First call for comments on the 2024 preliminary budget. Second call for comments on the 2024 preliminary budget. Third and final call. Seeing no one come forward, we will close the public hearing at 6:27. And that will end our public hearing presentations for tonight. We have Mr. Cooley, Gavin Cooley here, from the Spokane Homeless Collaborative. And so I'm not really sure, I'm gonna ask Counselor, we've gone past the public presentation, but could we use this time, since it's on there, as an opportunity for Mr. Cooley?
It's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda. So, Mr. Cooley, I asked if someone from the Spokane Regional Homeless Collaborative could come and present to council kind of the initial impetus behind this coalition, what the intent of this group is to do, and then basically what you would see as next steps for that. Tonight, because we do not have a resolution or a interlocal agreement that would specifically call out Millwood, there will be no action at this meeting on that resolution. So this is strictly a presentation to the council for kind of giving the council some better background than what I can possibly give. So please, if you have a few minutes, we appreciate it.
My name is Gavin Cooley, and for about the last 18 months, we've been working on what I would call a regional approach to responding to homelessness. And this really began with a review of what some other cities around the country were doing, in particular Houston and Atlanta. And it's kind of strange to go to Texas to learn about how to deal with homelessness, but they have a rate of homelessness that's about 1/10. They're 89% lower than Spokane County. So for every 10 we have, they have 1. And they were a great example for us to look to because in 2012, they were on HUD's list of actually losing funding because they were doing such a poor job responding to homelessness in their community, and their rates were much higher than cities around the country. So they responded very, very quickly, and it's been an interesting evolution for them because at the point they're at now, which is by far the lowest homelessness rate in the nation of large municipal areas, they're really viewed as like, well, what programs are you doing? You know, what specific things are you doing that are so much different than everybody else? And so the prior mayor there, Anise Parker, for 3 terms, it was kind of the architect of that system, along with a key advisor that we've hired to work with us here, Mandy Chapman Semple. They've gotten that question. People are flying in from New York, a lot of people flying in from California, as you can imagine, a lot of people flying in from Seattle and Portland, other cities struggling. And as they pointed out over and over again, they said this question is really tough for us because we're not doing anything particularly special. What we are doing is we've found a way to take all the moving parts of our homelessness response system throughout Houston area. It's in this case, it's the city of Houston and the 3 surrounding counties, and gotten them to work together and collaborate. So they have a central organization that creates a strategy that everybody works on together, and then they weave all the responses back together. So what ends up happening is you eliminate a whole lot of duplication, and you really focus on the key initiatives and outcomes that everybody agrees need to be worked on. And they're spending actually quite a bit less per homeless individual than we are here in the Spokane area. And when Mandy Chapman Semple, really the administrative architect of that system, came to Spokane for 10 days about 3 months ago, she said we actually have not only a lot more resource, but we actually have a homelessness response system that is better than what they had in Houston in 2012. Dramatically better, but it's obviously everybody's doing their own thing. Nobody's talking, nobody's collaborating. They're all off doing individual things. Nobody's tracking outcomes or needs, and there's a lot of duplication within the system. So I kind of bring that up just as almost a ray of hope, because Spokane is in the top 10 homelessness rates in the nation now. And while most of the nation is somewhat flat right now, we were up 36% last year, and it looks like we're going to have a similar type of increase next January. At least we're on track for another dramatic increase. And while a lot of cities, even cities that are struggling, are going the other direction. So we've come a long way in working together. Mayor Freeman was at the Council of Governments a few weeks ago at the fairgrounds, and I think at this point we have 7 jurisdictions, including the city of Spokane, Spokane County, and all the surrounding jurisdictions, and wanting to have Millwood be a part of that, where we're all talking for a couple hours each Thursday, bi-weekly on Thursday evenings, the electeds, 2 from each jurisdiction plus key staff. And really, after a lot of conversation just about the general concepts of this approach, are getting down to the nitty-gritty at this point. So we're really focusing in on the specific dollars that would go into it initially, and staffing and governance issues. The dollars themselves that we're really looking at right now are the HUD dollars that pass through what we have, the region called a continuum of care, onto the city of Spokane, which is the collaborative applicant for the continuum of care. So in other words, the city of Spokane acts as kind of the proxy agent for those HUD dollars, but they belong to the region. They're no more the city of Spokane's than they are the counties, than they are Millwood's. These are regional dollars coming from HUD. That's about $7 million a year, should be going up a little bit. And then Department of Commerce at state is providing about $13 million a year. And again, those are regional dollars. There's been political problems, just a lot of problems in our homelessness response in terms of how we coordinate. Commerce has not gotten along well with the city or the county, and so now they're going out and kind of doing almost the job that we should be doing locally, deciding what projects need our attention, which ones are working together, which ones are providing good outcomes. And instead, Commerce is doing that homework themselves at the state level and awarding directly, because they really don't trust the jurisdictions. But they are indicating that they would really like to see a regional entity that was non-political in nature, that had the subject matter expertise of homelessness response at the front end, that they would love to grant those dollars, those $13 million in annual dollars or more, to an agency like that. So what you would end up with is most of the employees in the direct homelessness response at the city, which are about 22, and several more at the county, would move into this central organization. You'd have a CEO hired, and then you would begin to collaborate directly with many, many providers. And there's, as you know, it's a really complex system. In some ways, people say, well, what would be different? So we've talked about the collaboration, we've talked about, just eliminating duplication, et cetera. But very likely what we've seen in Houston and Atlanta and other cities that are moving in the right direction is they have a central area that acts as the hub. So you could call it a navigation center, you could call it a triage center, but essentially what it does, there's a place in Houston called the Beacon. When somebody walks in there, it's a really nice place. It's adjacent to the Anglican Church, the oldest church in Houston, right downtown, in a really nice area of downtown Houston, and extremely well run. It's not an area of blight whatsoever. And people come in there and walk in, the first thing they do is they walk up to a counter and they turn in their clothing. It's kind of like going to the gym. You get a basket and you get kind of hospital garments, and you hand them back your garments. They're laundered while you have a really great meal. And the 3 times I visited there, lawyers show up. If an individual shows up that's having identification issues, a lawyer will show up and start working on those issues that that individual needs to work on with respect to identification or respect to legal matters. And then somebody else that's aligning services for this individual, or somebody else that's aligning housing for this individual, or working with the vouchers, like we have obviously the housing agency here in Spokane. There's all kinds of services, but there's no real tracking. There's a really great data capability. When you go up to it's called the Coalition for Homelessness, and they handle all the data, which this organization here in Spokane would too. At that time, they were decommissioning an encampment, and we went into the room, and the gentleman that runs this said, could you bring up that encampment that we're going out to this Thursday? And there were 32 individuals, and then he hit on the screen what that was. It popped up 32 names with pictures. Every one of those people but one had been assigned to housing and services. And the morning of decommission, they show up, and everybody, there's vans, there's carpools, et cetera. They deliver them to their services, places of service, where they're going to live. It's not just closing an encampment and then where do they go? And that's how they've operated. And they, in the case of Texas, there's not a lot of local dollars, almost none. And they don't even participate in some of the federal healthcare dollars that we do here. And so what they do tap into, though, are federal dollars very effectively. And so there's a lot of dollars in their system that we haven't even really looked to, SSI, SSDI, and other flows of funds. So there's those opportunities also. But I get a little out of my lane when I talk about how we're going to address homelessness. The main thing now is to get a regional formation, to get a good board with people in the various sectors that they're assigned to that can speak for those sectors and provide leadership, bring dollars in from those sectors. So there's public housing, there's private housing on the board, there's philanthropy, there's a business position, medical, mental health, there's a person with lived experience, and then there's the government representatives, because we are using public dollars. So there's 5 elected representatives, 1 from the city, 1 from the county, 1 from the valley, 1 from the small cities, and 1 tribal representative. So there's those 5 that are elected representatives. A little bit of friction right now because of why only 1 at the city. But again, these are regional dollars that belong to everybody, and I think we're slowly getting everybody to recognize that they're just as important to the, you have the same rights here in Millwood as you do in the city of Spokane, as you do in the county. So everybody has equal representation there between those larger jurisdictions. Mayor, I'll stop there and just to ask if there's any questions. You've been coming to those meetings.
So I think there was some confusion from the council as to what we obligate ourselves as Millwood for this stage. When we sign that initial agreement, that is strictly for the introductory stage, if you will, because we still have a long way to go before we actually end up with a interlocal agreement for forming the actual regional homeless collaborative, correct?
Right. We've drafted an interlocal agreement. We worked with 6 attorneys for a couple months, but we have an interlocal agreement drafted, enabling legislation for the jurisdictions and corporate bylaws. It's a public development authority, a little different than Houston, which is a nonprofit, because here we're dealing with public dollars. They're mostly dealing with federal and donated dollars. They're using a lot of oil and gas money to address their problems. But yeah, we would amend those as we go along. There's really no, because they're regional dollars, and in most cases not reaching Millwood anyway, I think the real intent and the relationship with some of the smaller jurisdictions is really to have clear communication and where we understand what the regional needs are within the system and they're represented. So we don't just set something up that really the city of Spokane dominates, which is what's happening now. The city of Spokane is the collaborative applicant for those HUD dollars. They pretty much decide where they're going to spend them, how they're going to spend them. And what we'd like to do is create a more regional approach. And so that's really the relationship that we'd like to form with Millwood, Liberty Lake, Cheney, Airway Heights, Medical, the other smaller cities.
So I think for us, one of the things is that, as Mr. Cooley says, it's regional approach, regional dollars, regional participation. If we were to elect not to participate in that structure, then we would, for intents and purposes, look to be on our own, if you will. So participating in it does give us a way to express that we are part of the overall response to homelessness in the area. And it would show that we are participating in such a way that would give us access as a jurisdiction to the resources that are being marshaled by the regional authority.
Correct.
So at this point, I'd open it up to the council, and Miss BC, if you have any questions, just shout them out over there. But if the council has questions for Mr. Cooley, please. Gavin is, you get kind of one shot, he's getting pulled in a lot of different ways, so.
No, we could, here's, this is a nice friendly venue. It's much better than some of my other. Thank you.
So questions, Mr. Sander?
Well, two, one is I noticed in the I guess the bylaws is that the city can be represented when, say, reach 100,000 population. And that seems like an awful high hurdle, and I think we don't have anybody that's close to that. We don't have anybody that's even close to 50,000 or even 25,000. But as we continue to grow, we'd hope, they're gonna have some issues, and I guess I was concerned that there's only the two cities and one person from trying to represent all the other towns and cities on the board.
I think at the end of the day, it is almost like a caucus situation. I mean, whether it's the city of Spokane trying to figure out between the mayor's office and a strong mayor form of government, the administration, versus the council legislative and the seven that go like this a lot, they're gonna have to find one voice to represent all those perspectives and stand at the board. And so I think that same caucus situation would exist with the smaller communities, that somehow they need to speak with the interests of the smaller communities in mind. But one of the restraints is keeping the board smaller. We're learning a lot. Seattle tried to regionalize their response, and it's been a debacle. So we've spent a lot of time kind of Seattle-proofing our proposal. And so one of them is just not to let the board get too large. And so there was a initiative where there was going to be more elected representatives and more non-elected, a board of 20 versus 13 or 14. And for those of us that have served on really large boards that don't get anything done, we thought, let's keep this a little smaller and responsive and have tight meetings and tight deliverables. But it does beg, I think that's a valid concern. I mean, how do you package all those perspectives into one voice from the small communities is problematic. It's going to force some real cooperation among the small cities.
I think the other one that kind of goes along that same line is, our STA, we have ex officio representatives from the other cities in the region. And at least we sit at the table, we hear the discussion. I guess I'm a little bit concerned that this is all gonna happen somewhere out there, and how are we gonna keep in touch?
Yeah. That's a great point. I mean, we should absolutely have it open for ex officio. We've learned that in our own meetings. We are now posting Zoom links the next day to the entire meeting. We've opened up it's a meeting of electeds. If we don't get the electeds to stand up and vote this in, we don't have anything. And I think it's become really important for us to have the small communities and the larger. And so this particular bi-weekly meeting is of the electeds. But even then, we've opened it up quite a lot. There's more and more people at the sidelines, and if time permitting, we're trying to invite in that conversation, and there'll be a lot of public process. I should mention SpokaneUnite.org has all of our minutes, all of our Zoom meetings, the agenda, pretty similar to what you're providing for your own meeting here.
So Dan, I think you sitting on STA see it better than most. There is one small city representative that votes on STA, but the other representatives are there if they choose to be there. And so if you want to be counted and participate, then it's up for that city to be there and provide their input to their delegate. I can say right now that sitting on SRTC, we are fortunate that it is SRTC and there were dollars and the mission is collaborative on the Transportation Council. I would hate to see what, by expanding that Transportation Council, SRTC, to 22 voting members, what that would look like if we were all arguing over a minimal pot of money. 22 folks is a lot to have any sort of definitive direction. I think it puts the onus on the represented jurisdictions to go in and make their concerns known and their voices heard.
And perhaps that's something we should do ourselves as, you know, as your term on the regional planning, transportation planning. Switches again.
Somebody's got to be there.
Yeah, but last time Deer Park got our spot instead of us.
No, now we've expanded that board, so everybody has a vote. Millwood has our own independent vote. Deer Park has an independent vote. So
We'll still be there.
somebody else will still be there in the future, but somebody's got to be there. Somebody's got to be there if you want a voice at the table, just like at these other ones. You are not a voting member of STA, but you are there at the meetings with your opportunity to be heard and your opportunity to talk to.
I have the voting numbers,
Yes.
contact information for us to talk.
So yeah, so it's definitely how much effort we as the jurisdiction want to put into it.
So we as a jurisdiction, if this proceeds, then perhaps we need to have one of us to volunteer just to show up, or at least just to read and hear and report back. Because it's not fair to the mayor, whoever the mayor may be, to try to keep up with all the other stuff you're doing.
No,
But somebody needs to do, we need to know, keep current.
we do.
I think we could amend the bylaws. Honestly, I like this notion, like the ex officio you're saying, that we could amend the bylaws to have the regular meetings of the board directors by requirement have a time period for electeds of other jurisdictions to speak at the meeting, so that the voice is absolutely heard, because otherwise there may not be enough time or whatever, they make the time. We could put that in the bylaws.
It's also one of those things, I think, somebody just shows up every 6 months. What kind of, they don't know what's already happened.
Yeah.
So
We feel the more participation, the better this is going to be. I think accountability is so important. That's another thing Seattle didn't have. And we need to measure outcomes. We need to have that accountability through those voices.
Thank you.
Other questions? So I think our next steps would be, once that interlocal is amended, and for us, we can get that in front of the council and get that signed, or get that in front of the council for their opportunity for consideration. And I would hope that council would reflect on that, because I can see from where we are now and where we need to be. But I'm the mayor, and that would be up to the legislative body, but we would welcome getting that back from the collaborative and
Right.
and considering that in due process.
Those, and your comments have already been appreciated, Mayor, at the meetings. And if anybody wants to see those draft interlocal agreement, draft bylaws, et cetera, they are on the SpokaneUnite.org website.
And I did provide those to the council as
good.
part of that, so the council has those to review. I think really what it was just we were looking potentially for the revised one where Millwood was included in that. so.
Probably towards year end, one of our things is to get politics out of homelessness response,
Yeah.
but as a practical matter, nobody's going to move on this till after the election. So sometime after year end or in the first quarter, I think we'll be coming up for the final vote to move this thing forward. And I think also, speaking with Commissioner Cooney from the county, I think we'll call another council of governments just to get a final kind of meeting of the minds of all the electeds, which all of us could attend also.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Gavin, for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. And I will communicate with
Rick Romero.
Rick Romero and Sandra?
Yeah, Teresa Sanders, yep.
Teresa Sanders, and get something with a signature line for us to consider.
And I should have just mentioned, just from the appearance of bias, three of us are all volunteers. So none of us has a paid position in this or even a particular perspective other than probably what all of you would represent doing the same thing. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and appreciate you coming out. Thank you. So that will conclude our action items for this evening, and now we move to our reports. So our first report tonight is our treasurer, our acting city clerk, and our acting code enforcement officer, Ms. Mackin.
So on the clerk side, we've had a few public records requests, which is not uncommon. Lisa's filling those. Code enforcement, there was a slight uptick in the last couple months. I think Lisa's got them all down to one that is not quite there yet, but we'll get them there. From the treasurer's side, gee, I haven't been busy at all and had nothing to do, so you guys have seen the evidence. I'm still going to crunch some numbers. I'd like to know what our traffic calming stuff is gonna be.
We'll talk about that.
Okay. So I will have a final budget hearing next month on the budget, work on water. And we have, what did I say on my schedule? We were gonna do the amendment,
On the
the
ad valorem.
final budget hearing, and the 2 resolutions for next month. So that's about all I have, except I would just like to say thank you to Lisa, who has really carried the weight in the last couple months, and I just can't appreciate her enough.
So just as a reminder, we will need a quorum plus one at the next November, at the November regular meeting, because we will be considering the budget and the ad valorem tax.
Hopefully be adopting the
Yes.
resolutions, or we're not gonna get any property tax next year.
Just to let you know. Any questions for Debbie? Mr. Sander?
So I think, even though we don't like to see a budget, a rate increase, the new rate schedule is, works because we know the
Yes.
inflation parts of fixed stuff.
And I can pinpoint exactly where it doesn't balance, the fixed versus the
I
variable
think,
versus
so
the
all the
capital.
effort you went through to separate the fixed cost from the overage, from the operating cost, or the overage cost, is paying off, I think, so we'll know exactly
It is.
where.
We have to remember that when the rate study was done, the assumption was that we would raise the rate 2% per year to meet inflation, but then last year we had 8%.
Yep.
So, makes a difference.
Stuff costs. Any other questions? Thank you, Debbie. So, facilities report, Mr. Shiwi.
So we held off some of the street sweeping and stuff from getting the streets cleaned last month. And I don't know if anybody had noticed or not, but from the sidewalk on the east side of Argonne from IEP down to the bridge, there was everything from weeds overgrown it, dead branches, garbage, sand piles, everything. We got that all cleaned up and made it as safe as it can be for pedestrians to walk through there. I attended on the computer, I attended the regional pavement cut policy annual meeting on proper procedures and everything that everybody's adopted to when you're gonna cut into a street. We've been hauling off a lot of the overburden that we've been, like I was telling you earlier about everything we pull off every little job, gets stockpiled up there, and actually was dreading having to haul it off and pay for the cost of dump fees, but Paul came to our rescue, living on a hillside, and decided he would take some of that and fill in a ravine he has, so we got to dump all that stuff for free, so that's been good. So we've hauled many loads up there in the last week or so, getting that all cleaned up. As far as the sidewalk hazard abatement project and the town hall elevator project, both of them are finally in the scheduling phases to get the ball rolling on that stuff. my argon asphalt patch areas where all the nasty bumps and stuff are. They have a schedule for that for the 24th and 25th of this month, weather permitting. And then I'm on a hunt, like Debbie was saying, I'm on a hunt, as I am annually, for a pull-behind compressor. So we can get all our sprinkler systems and irrigation stuff blown out for winter time and get prepared for leaf season, so. One last thing, I got the analysis back from the engineers from the citizens' request at a previous council meeting restricting the traffic flows on Empire by installing gates. And I got that back, and I think we need to wait on a little bit of legal counsel on this type of scenario. And hopefully by next month, we should have a decent amount of information to come to council with on that topic. I think that's all I got.
Questions for Kyle? Thank you, Kyle. Utilities report, Mr. Erdahl.
All our water samples came back good this month. Prestige came out and replaced the failing solenoid we had on our discharge line at Butler Well. And they also got measurements to replace the flow meter down at the Old Park Well. We got the new gas line inspected for the generator at the new Park Well. And Legacy Heating and Cooling made all the final connections, so we got it all backfilled, ready to go. We're just waiting on AES to hook up the electrical, get that going. We sent out final notices to get backflows tested, and we received 100% compliance on devices this year, so
Good job.
hopefully our sample will be good in the next few weeks. Debbie, Kyle, and I attended a harassment, discrimination, and retaliation prevention training put on by WCIA. We also took a class digging into public works, talked about MRSC rosters and the bidding process at the community college. And sewer, everything's going well.
Questions for Matt?
Will we have a celebration when the generator kicks on for the first time?
No, we will not have a celebration, because that means the power's out. Let's celebrate the power, man. Any other questions for Matt? All right, thank you, Matt. Planning report is actually included in, from Ms. Tanio, is included in your packet. The planning commission meeting on the 27th was canceled. There was no particular agenda item. Do have about 6 permits for processing. Most of them are signs. There is a dock and a carport. She had a number of questions for ADUs, things like that. We are in receipt of SEPA documents and notices for both the Spokane Valley Pines grade separation and the Koch annexation from Trentwood Irrigation District. We're also sent Amanda to the Planning Technical Advisory Committee, the PTAC, for the proposed land capacity analysis methodology. There will be a meeting of the steering committee of elected officials to accept that land capacity analysis methodology on the 17th of this month. So more than likely that will be finalized. After that, it will kind of be up to the local jurisdictions to perform or contract to perform their own LCAs for the upcoming Growth Management Act review and updates. So Amanda's been doing a good job. We're lucky that we're fortunate to have her filling in or doing what she's doing. And so if you have any questions on planning, you can reach out to her directly. Legal report, Mr. Wurst.
Good evening. Just a quick update on the pending litigation on the Land Use Petition Act matter. As is typical with litigation, it starts up and then it chugs along very slowly. We're getting the record compiled to get over to the petitioner as required by statute. But other than that, that's kind of where that process stands. We have, as was mentioned, we've had a little bit of an uptick in some code enforcement issues. We have 2 particular properties that need to just identify, and we typically I'd ask you for authorization to commence litigation after an executive session. These two properties are not unfamiliar to the city in terms of code enforcement as well as residential temporary dwelling units on their property. One is 3215 North Argonne Road, at the Argonne Cycle. The mayor engaged in a significant amount of discussions with the property owner over the summer. There was RV, well, in the past, there's been vehicle used for overnight residential purposes. There's been RVs over there recently, at least one RV over there recently. That's in the C2 zone and that's prohibited. Residential, temporary residential use of an RV is prohibited in the C2 zone. The second property is located at 10423 East Trent Avenue. It's Hildebrand Auto Service and Repair. We commenced code enforcement litigation against that property late summer. They took a default, did not appear. Clearly, we're aware of the litigation. I spoke to representatives by phone. They came to my office. They came to the city hall. All were less than comfortable conversations with anybody. But they decided not to appear. We took a judgment, and that is continuing to accrue daily penalties. That was for unauthorized business purposes without a business license. They are now using that property to, at least on a couple of occasions, there's been 2 RVs, I believe, observed with occupants, power cords, all of that nature. Again, that's in the C2 zone. That's a prohibited use of that property as well.
C1.
Excuse me, C1 zone. And I think if the city's code enforcement efforts historically have been aimed at achieving voluntary compliance. When a property owner has demonstrated on a number of occasions that compliance is not on the radar, I think we have to come to you and enforce the rights of the city under the city code, which would be initiation of code enforcement litigation on each of those properties. So happy to answer any questions, all of which has been documented, observed, photographed, not just on one occasion, but as much as Kyle and city crew have a lot of substantive work to do, they do get tasked with going out, observing photos, taking photos, observing the property and confirming non-compliance as well.
Questions? So Mr. Wurst will begin. Argonne Cycle, we've had multiple discussions. I'm hoping that it can be resolved by the appearance of further action, notice and order. The individual there might need some persuasion to persuade the other individual to achieve compliance. I will simply say Hildebrand Auto is being blatantly just ignoring everything, and we're kind of at our wits' end on that one. As Brian said, this has been ongoing for years, and we've attempted in multiple times to try and engage them. They at every turn have pushed the envelope farther and farther and farther, and at this point, it's just, as much as we don't like to, or we prefer not to, I would say, it's something that we've got to move toward. Questions? All right, thank you, Brian. So mayor's report,
Motion.
what?
Do we need a motion to authorize?
Do we?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, council has the sole authority to authorize litigation, so.
my apologies. So based on the discussion of the two entities requiring no further legal action, is there a motion from the council to authorize Mr. Wurst and Witherspoon to proceed with legal action up to and including all available remedies?
Yeah, up to including all available remedies, which could include a monetary penalty. I think it has come to the point, at least on one of them, that we would seek an order of abatement.
So moved.
Sir, second, any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, Mr. Worst is authorized to move for those, to enforce those actions.
I don't like it, but thank you. It's the last step.
So now, Mayor's report. It's been budget season. Debbie and I have been working on pulling the budgets together. The mayor's budget message will be coming out shortly for a full recap of what happened last year, what we're doing this year, what we're looking at. As she said, we are modifying our capital this year just to try and avoid as much of this inflationary gouge as we can. We don't have anything really we have those few items pressing, but we've really sorted through to just keep what's pressing there. The Homeless Coalition, or the Homeless Collaborative, as you've seen, things kind of move as they move there. There are regular meetings on Thursday. I listen to those meetings because because council has not yet acted in one way or another. I am not actively participating in those meetings because Millwood's not there. So I'm just keeping abreast of that situation. Other than that, we just need to make sure that council members are present at the next couple meetings so we can get our 2024 budget passed and any of the other ad valorem, et cetera, issues done. Any questions for me on anything going on? Thank you. So that concludes our reports for this evening. You have council information packets. You have the sheriff's August 2023 report. I asked that the packet include from Jurassic Parliament some public comment guidelines. Those are just for edification for the council, but also get them out there just generally for the public to understand how public comments and citizen comments are kind of handled and what the legislative bodies typically expect for that. Also, we received a development code text amendment from a group of citizens, and that will be forwarded to our planner in due process for that development code. We'll see where that leads. If it may require, at a cursory level, it may require a comp plan amendment, so I'm not really sure kind of what, but I'm not a planner, so Ms. Tanyo has received that. She'll begin working through it and have a report back either in person or at the next council meeting. So that has been received. So any questions on any of those items that are in there? So now that brings us to item number 10, which are public remarks. This is the opportunity for citizens to address the council either in person or by submitting their remarks to the city. And we have two folks signed up tonight. We have, first up is Todd Beasy. Mr. Beasy, please.
Todd Beasy, 8610 East South Riverway. I have two items and one question. I want to thank you for attending the meeting of the Millwood candidates. Kelly was there on Zoom, Sean was there in person, and I understand Andy had an excused absence. And I heard that there were about 35 people in the audience in attendance. And of course, the League of Women Voters did a wonderful job of running that. So the other item is the Freeman Welch Comer Argonne Road project. Many Millwood residents and owners of businesses in Millwood want the width of Argonne Road to remain as it currently is. People support intelligent traffic lights. They support keeping and increasing and upgrading pedestrian crosswalks, such as signage, illumination, lights, contrasting texture. Those are my comments. One question. I didn't see it, but other residents of Millwood saw it, that both city dump trucks were traveling the streets of Millwood together and such. and they were asking me, what are they doing? I said, I don't know. So I'm here to ask you guys, what were you doing?
That's what we were doing. We were hauling all the overburden out of the Butler yard up to Paul's house.
Oh, okay. So, okay. When I see them next, I will let them know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next we have Mr. Steve Seifert.
Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Seifert. I live at 10507 East Empire. Leaf pickup starting, and my son last night was out blowing the leaves out to the front of the street. And a gentleman in an orange UTV that works for the Millwood maintenance crew pulled up in front of his driveway and stopped. So my son pulled his air muffs off and took his, he's got a backpack air blower. He works for a tree trimming business. He's a supervisor. So he took it off and proceeded to walk towards the gentleman, and the gentleman goes, WTF. Now, I'm not going to say the words, but I don't want to say it. What the? And my son walks up to him and goes, what's going on? He goes, you can't blow those leaves in the street. I'm going to blow them right back into your yard. And my son goes, well, that's what I plan to do too. As soon as I get them all blown out to the edge, we blow them back into the front of the yard. I've lived there for 36 years. We've done it the same way. Kyle knows that. Matt knows that. These are the leaves in question, Matt. Does that look like there's very many in the road? There's more in the street back here in the background, over here by Dolly Fox's, than there is that he's got even on the road. And this, he hasn't even gone and
Mr.
cleaned the road yet.
Mr. Seifert, do you have a comment?
That's my comment. My son wrote an email to you. You have not responded. I came down here today to try to get a hold of you, and Lisa and I were talking, and then she informed me that you guys were out working in the field. And I go, okay, well, whatever. We're sitting there talking. I asked her again. Lisa and I have known each other for 45 years at least. And I asked, I go, did you hear what's going on? She goes, yeah. And I go, yeah, it's kind of, I don't know what's going on, pretty unprofessional. And this woman came in and she slammed the window in my face. She wouldn't even let me talk.
So Mr. Seifert,
anyway,
so
that's what was going on, and I just don't understand the professionalism and these guys represent our city.
Mr. Seifert, I've heard the side from my staff too, and I would say that both sides were not acting professionally or civilly. And so my staff and the city staff do not have to stand for belligerent or abusive behavior from citizens, period,
Okay.
period.
The police officer that they sent down to our house
So,
tonight,
so if
were 100% right.
if your son pursues city employees to the shop and then back and harasses those employees, I will do the same thing again.
He followed him down here to.
He followed him down here and confronted him,
And what he
correct?
said was, I don't have my
So
phone.
here's the deal. If you want to lodge a personal action, come down and talk to me, period.
I just wanted to bring it up.
I appreciate you bringing it up, but here's the deal. Here's the deal. Your son was also abusive and belligerent to my staff.
Yeah. when
No,
he
no,
was
that's
in-
it. That's it. We're done. Thank you very much.
You said at the end,
Thank you.
I know where you live. You said
Hey,
that.
sir,
Thank you.
sir.
That's all right. So that ends our public comments for tonight, unless there is anybody out there who would like to make a comment. Second call? Third call?
Why not?
Oh, sure.
I got my bid in right before you hammered.
You can have it.
The gavel goes down. My name's Winston Wiggins, 9925 East Dalton. I have well, it's not really a question, it's a comment and a suggestion about public comments. I've talked to a couple of the council members. I talked to Sean the other night at the forum. And they both expressed their willingness to hear from the public. But the way they approach it is show up at the meetings. That's great. The problem is that looking at it from the public standpoint, the agendas aren't available until a couple of days before the meetings. And at that point, we're behind the 8 ball. And then we only get like 2 minutes to say anything. And so I would like to encourage the city, mayor, I think you could do this without the council, to expand both the geographic notification and the time frame notification of things that are coming up ahead of time for the board, for consideration. Now, I have tried to email some of the council members. Some frankly have not responded, period. Others have, Kelly has, but I've got some ideas about that. That's my recommendation. I think you ought to have a broader time frame, broader geographic notification process. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Sir?
Doug Sandler, 8612 East Bridgeport, and I guess I just want to echo on that. It was very good to hear both of you say, we want to be representative, and so I've been chewing on the same kind of thoughts. How do we engage that more? And that just be a really positive thing. Thanks.
Any other public comments? Public comments are complete. So council comments. Ms. BC, we'll do you on the phone. Do you have any comments this evening?
I want to thank everyone for sharing their public comments tonight and thank Mayor for letting me call in.
Great, thank you. Mr. Stravens.
Well, I just thank the public for showing up tonight. I appreciate it.
Mr. Sander.
I'm glad to see that the trees made it to the budget, or proposed budget anyway, that we've had quite a effort to learn about our tree situation. I'm glad to see we're making a bit of a start there, so thank you.
Mr. Van Hees.
Nothing.
Mr. Culler.
I'll just say it's good to keep the capital budget lean for next year because it's gonna get expensive. We've already seen it this year, so.
Yeah.
Do what we can do with what we have. That's all I have.
So that concludes council remarks. Any announcements? Anything? So next meeting, Tuesday, November 14th, 6 PM. We will need a quorum as we've discussed for the next budget items to come up. And if there's nothing else, do I have a motion for adjournment?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. You.